Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, hosted by Bruce Hutchin, in episode number 156.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Scott Smathers joins us from Nebraska, where he serves as the executive director of the Nebraska Sportsman's Foundation, where it works to protect, enhance the rights and tradition for sportsmen, conservationists, and agricultural production. Scott is no stranger to the conservation effort in the state of Nebraska. He serves on the Nebraska Land Trust Board of Directors, is a founding member and executive board member for Big Game Conservation Association, an executive board member and past president of the Lincoln chapter of Pheasants Forever, member of Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation, and Whitetails Unlimited. Scott attended the University of Wisconsin, also my alma mater. He majors in economics and finance, and I can not wait to tell you how he got from economics and finance to the conservation world. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, Bruce Hutchin, and we're heading over to Nebraska today, and we're going to talk to Scott Smathers, and he is the executive director of Nebraska Sportsman's Foundation. Hey, Scott, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bruce. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on the show, and I appreciate you taking time.
Yeah, we got our mutual friend over there in Nebraska, Chris Edwards, and Chris, I know, is very active in the conservation and sportsman groups in the state. And in a warm-up, you mentioned that he is the chairman of the Nebraska Sportsman Foundation.
That is correct. He is. He's in his second year of chairman. He joined our organization on our board 4 years ago. New to the organization, and his passion and his ability to coordinate and help our organization grow has been tremendous, and we're very excited that Chris is our chairman. And if he ever hears this, I hope he doesn't, but I think he'll be chairman for quite a while. So,
well, I don't know if it's going to be on air, so I guess he will hear that. Hey, really quickly, let's tell our listeners right up front how to get in touch with you, how to find information about Nebraska Sportsman Foundation, and anything else we're going to talk about. Now, that could be Facebook, that could be Twitter, Instagram, your website, and even a phone number or an email address. So let's let the listeners know how to get in touch with you, Scott.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And right now we are currently using Facebook as our main mode. We're in the process of reinventing our web design, presently speaking, working with a local company here. And so for the Facebook page, it is simply, obviously, www.facebook.com/NEB Sports FND /. And that is our Facebook page. We keep that updated on a daily basis with what's going on in activities. From a standpoint, our office is located in Lincoln, Nebraska. We actually, because we're heavily involved with the Unicamel here, we are half a block west of the Capitol. And my email actually is smathers@neb.rr.com. And our office number, if anybody wants to give a call and find out a little more about us, it's 402-805-4308.
Hey, thanks for that, Scott. And the other thing, listeners, I'm very happy to say that Scott and I are alumni of University of Wisconsin-La Crosse in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And Scott and I were marveling how many people, once you get out past west of the Mississippi, a lot of people don't know much about La Crosse, but he and I both had great careers and did graduate with a degree from there. And Scott did graduate in economics and finance and a minor in communication. So I'm gonna branch off right there, Scott. No, wait a minute. Finance, economics. Okay, I get that. Especially working in government, that's so important. Communications, I sure get that. But how about the wildlife? How about sportsmen? How does this all work out?
Well, I grew up, obviously, like most of your listeners probably did, with mentors. My dad, my next-door neighbor, a retired lifetime Marine officer that were avid outdoorsmen. And so I grew up with the rod in one hand, the gun in the other, and learning to conserve and be a conservationist in natural resources. And and that's where I spent all my time. I was that guy in high school that would skip class to run a strap lines. That teachers had trouble finding in certain times of the year because I was not in school and was out chasing whatever game I was chasing that part of the year. So when I went to school, I wanted to become a park ranger, for the lack of a better term, and I wanted to work within the national park system. And my father was a career business person and didn't think that was a wise choice. And so after my first semester of college, in talking with my counselor, he laid out at the time in the early 80s what income opportunities existed for folks within the park system, and it wasn't a very large number at that time. And then the isolation factor. And in college, I discovered that I also enjoyed the company of the other sex on a great deal and figured, well, isolation, no money, I'll make my dad happy. So I switched to economics and finance. Wasn't a bad choice. Wasn't my first choice. But then I spent 20 plus years in corporate America working with finance. And after 20 years, I said, I'm going back to my first love. And I went back. I left corporate America and went back to my roots, my natural passions. And I actually went to work as a field representative for Pheasants Forever for a couple years, and was a volunteer of this organization. And as they grew, we wanted to put a more present voice within our state leaders and our Department of Natural Resources and our Nebraska Game and Parks. And so that's how we started with the Sportsman's Foundation, and how I started. So it all kind of went full circle. And for the last 10 years, basically, I've spent my time in what my passions are, and that's the outdoors, enhancing, protecting, and recruiting. And that's kind of how it all came full circle. But yes, it to go to economics and finance was a strange, but it made my father very happy. And I have to say, it provided a nice living for 20 years. But the call of my passions was what took me back.
Well, that's good. And I was talking with a guy the other day. Actually, he's the surgeon that replaced my hip about 2 weeks ago. Actually, 2 weeks ago today. And he's in his 50s. He's a rock star in hip replacements. Name's Steve Myers. Anybody that's hearing my voice, if you have a hip that needs to be replaced, Steve Myers, Front Range Orthopedics, is one of the top 5 in the United States, North America, and probably ranked in the top 10 or 20 in the whole world. So there's a shout out for Steve Myers. But anyway, having said that, you think about that you're never done. And I retired, and you read my background.
Yes.
And I've been hunting whitetails since 1966. Out of La Crosse, went to a little town called Union Center, Waniwak, with Dick Rogers, and as they say, the rest is history. So I've been chasing the wily whitetail for over 50 years. And, I went into corporate America just like you did, and made all the fame and fortune mistakes. Not too much fame and fortune. I made a couple of bucks, and then called it quits. But then, like you, I've been heavily involved in Colorado at the Colorado Sportsman's Roundtable. I was actually elected Southeast region in Colorado. So I had spent a couple of years doing that. And I think, anybody that's listening to this, if you're a hunter, you're a fisherman, you're in the outdoors. I don't care if you're 16 years old or 65 years old, men, women, get involved locally. Just pick one activity. And I think Scott will look at this wholeheartedly, because we owe it to the future of our traditions of hunting, fishing, of the outdoors to become involved. Scott, why don't you jump on that and hit that out of the park?
Bruce, you couldn't have said that any better. I will tell you that, when I was not involved from a career standpoint in the outdoors, I was like most of the folks that are probably listening. I enjoyed my passions. I enjoyed my particular avenues, whether it was upland bird hunting, whitetail, big game, angling for specific species, or whatever that role was. And I really didn't pay too much attention, except for at maybe a 30,000-foot level, of what was going on within our own outdoor enthusiasm in the world and the heritage of it. And a good friend of mine who was watching what was going on in regards to public lands and some other issues back, 12, 13 years ago, started to open my eyes up. And I joined Pheasants Forever and Ducks Unlimited, and I started to see some of the issues that were coming about. And it struck me. We as sportsmen, typically, we have our buddies, we have our groups, we have our avenues that we spend all our time doing, but we really don't exercise our right to voice our opinions and thoughts with those who make the decisions of how we're going to proceed in our passions. And it just concerned me. And so from the standpoint of getting involved, I mean, I don't care if it's a local chapter of the local bass club, Whitetails Unlimited, QDMA, any one of those groups, Pheasants Forever, any one of these groups, get involved, because you'll see the other side of the fence. You'll see the disturbing numbers, quite frankly, of the reduction in folks that are pursuing life in the outdoors, chasing their passions. You'll see that there are folks making decisions that, quite frankly, don't have a vested interest in this future. And like I said, my passions run from the time I was old enough. My next door neighbor, I said, he took me up on bird hunting when I was 10, carried an old Harrington Richardson single shot 410. He made me keep my shell in my pocket the first 2 times we walked the field. And of course, I didn't know any better. And, the whole part was he was teaching me patience about when you're up on bird hunting, obviously, is waiting for that point, that flush, and not to be nervous, and to practice my skill set of shooting. And I was hooked. But I had that opportunity, somebody to teach me. I had somebody to guide me. My dad was an avid angler, and I have extreme fond memories of many, many hours on the water with him. The education I gained from him, not only about fishing, but also about life, that, like most people, didn't really hit me that he was that bright until I was 25 or 26. But the passions, you have to get involved. The Sportsman's Foundation, it was founded in 2002 here in Nebraska by a group of 6 outdoorsmen that were concerned at some of the legislation that was being proposed within our state's senators' body, and wanted to be able to provide a voice to those senators about who we are, what we represent in the state, and what we do from a conservation standpoint. And it has just grown from there. Now we as an organization sit at just under 13,000 members in our state, and we have a very active voice. We work on positive legislation, defeating negative legislation, educating those who don't understand why we do what we do. And if you can get involved on any level and then make your voice heard and pay attention to the issues, we are going to be able to protect what we all love. We're going to be able to protect it for the next generations. In addition to that, when you get involved with any one of these groups, there's a habitat or a conservation component that'll teach you that we not only take, but we provide, and we secure, and we enhance the local habitats and management. And I think that's valuable for anybody on anybody that is interested in the outdoors in any capacity, whether you're a photographer, a bird watcher, a hiker, that if we don't protect these natural resources, they're simply going to be gobbled up, they'll be misused, and eventually we won't have them. I guess the best example you can look at that is, what's going on around the country from water issues, both from drinking water and use of water for agricultural and municipalities. I mean, if we don't pay attention, we'll find ourselves in a world of hurt. And there's too much to be taught with the next couple of generations. I'm the father of 2 grown children. Both of them are avid outdoorsmen, love the outdoors, and now they're spreading their message to their generation through what I've taught them and my friends have taught them, just like I was taught. So we need to keep that cycle going.
Well said, Scott. And, we both echo, we're both beating the same drum, and listeners, just pick up the phone, find somebody, find a group in your area, and make it a goal. Put it on your bucket list to spend a couple hours involved in your sport. And if you don't have time, it doesn't take that much time, an hour a month maybe, but it's so important for our traditions of hunting. And speaking of tradition of hunting, you mentioned about a gentleman that gave you a 410, or you had a 410 and a shell in your pocket, and you started hunting. Tell us more about where your hunting traditions began, and I'm not sure what state you were in, but why don't you share a little time on that?
We had, my folks, I was born actually in Trenton, New Jersey, and lived in South Philadelphia. My dad at the time was in the Navy and was in Vietnam. When he got out of the Navy, my dad realized the surroundings that we were living in, was not comfortable with what that provided, so we moved to a little town out here in Nebraska outside of Lincoln called Malcolm, Nebraska, which happened to be situated exactly 3 miles between 2 of the state water bodies that were the most populated on the eastern side of the state. And so I was 3 miles either way, east or west, from the biggest playground in the world, quite frankly. And when you're a kid of 11, 12 years old, not to mention this little town is only 400 people at the time. And all these years later, now it's only 450. So what a wonderful opportunity for me. And my next-door neighbor was a retired Marine that when we moved in, and he became a father figure to me. He wanted to pass on his heritage, and he had been all over the world, been to New Zealand, Australia, been all over the world, both with the military and as a hunter of big game. And he's also was a world-renowned wildlife photographer for big game. And so my heritage started with learning about what is provided to you in respect to those factors. And he was the first one to take me upland bird hunting. He's the first one to take me waterfowl hunting. But his real passion was big game. His real passion was not only what's common in our country, but across the world. But he taught me how to whitetail hunt. And believe it or not, an old 30-06 open irons is what he gave me as my first official deer rifle. And that's what I hunted with. And the discipline I learned of watching, learning, understanding the surroundings and how the deer are going to move, I fell absolutely head over heels in love with it in the aspect. And then you combine that when hunting season was over, my dad and I spent all the time in the water. So that was my initial introduction. And I got to be honest with you, Bruce, as a kid, I thought I had the world in the palm of my hand. I had two.
You did?
Yeah, two bodies of water, all the public land around it, 3 miles from either direction from me. My folks finally instilled a rule that I had to be back into town by the time the sun was going down. Because at that time I rode my bike, of course, because they were getting tired of coming to the lake to find me. And so that's what I did. I grew up, and that's where my heritage started. And for me, and I think for a lot of folks that spend time in the outdoors, especially if you're a big game hunter or whitetail hunter or muley hunter, that solitude is not solitude. But that solitude provides an opportunity to reflect, learn. Even when you don't know you're learning, you're learning. It was amazing to me, to the things I could wake up to and learn in the woods. Provides lifelong lessons in a lot of areas, and so that was my background. And I, as my wife will attest, I still to this day at 52, about to be 52, spend more time in the non-civilized world than I do the civilized world. If that makes sense.
My type of guy.
It's a balance for me. We've all heard it said. It's that individual's church, his peace of mind, all those things, and all of them ring true. Every one of them are true.
Well, I know where you're speaking from. That's for darn sure. And let's talk about lessons learned. Share with the listeners a couple whitetail deer hunting lessons that you've been schooled by a mature buck and what you learned from that.
We have, my son is 24, about to be 25. And I've been dragging him with me since he was 6 or 7 years old. And when he was about 12, I said, all right, we're going to let you handle the gun. We're going to let you do everything on your own. I'm going to sit with you. But, of course, I was going to impart great wisdom on him, that here's the land, here's what we've got from a standpoint of scouting. And back then, trail cameras weren't widely used or popular. Quite frankly, they were very expensive back then, and we couldn't afford that. So it was all about being on the ground during preseason and watching and learning. And I take him with me, and I thought I was, here's the great master of the outdoors, teaching his kid how to track, how to spot, the travel patterns, everything else. And long story short is that we had identified a couple bucks on our property that were all decent shooters. But I even started with my son, like I've always practiced, is that we managed, whether it's a public land herd or private. Now, I have private ground now, but we manage that herd. And you take, the ugly bucks, you let the deer grow, those type of mentalities. And so with great anticipation, my son and I hit the field during the rifle season. In the first day, typical, we saw a lot of wonderful things, but nothing in the deer world. Second day, sun comes up, exactly like I told my son. They're going to come over that ridge. They're going to follow this trail down. They're going to hit this pinch point, and they're going to go over here. And we'll be in perfect range and perfect avenue of where they go. My son, of all his great wisdom at 12, said, "I don't think so, Dad." Of course, I said, "Okay, all right, why don't you think so?" He said, "Because the wind's blowing the other direction today." I said, "That's okay. We're in the shelter belt here. Where the wind's going to kind of swirl around us. We're really going to be fine." So as we sat and sat and sat and sat and sat, he finally looked behind him and said, "Hey, Dad, do you see all those deer behind us?" That had walked around us with the wind. And as I turned around, our largest buck on that public land that we had tracked forever was about 75 yards away. But I knew as soon as we turned around to get set up, we would be busted. My son, best comment ever. "We'll wait, but now that you've listened to me, we know where they'll be tomorrow." And so we left that night. I don't know who grew up more that day, my son or myself. But sure enough, not the very next day, but 2 days later, as we changed everything around, he was correct, and he did harvest that deer. So,
well, somebody taught him something. I mean, he was observant. Let's think about that.
He was observant. To me, the lesson I took away from it is that you could have 17 volumes of novels of information stored in your mind, in your heart, or written down. You never fully understand what wildlife is going to do or what Mother Nature is going to toss at you. You have to be prepared for everything. And that was the case. And it's odd that my son is now in the Army, and he was home during the deer season this year. And he and I hunted for the first time in 5 years again, full time all week, because he's been gone. And same thing. We had on the private property had scouted these deer. We had trail cam pics of them. We knew which ones we wanted to harvest and not harvest. And so for 4 days, we let all those deer that we agreed we weren't going to harvest go by. On the 5th day, somebody pushed some off the property behind us. The one buck we wanted, I was happened to be hunting in the middle of cut corn on a terrace system out of a ground blind. Came running by me at Mach speed, 20 yards from my blind. Obviously, I couldn't get a shot. And he ran by my son, he was down the creek line. Couldn't get a shot on him. And my son said, "That's okay. They'll come. And it was just the whole experience of the week. It reminded me of when he was a kid. We got to spend this whole week together. Well, he had a friend getting married on that Saturday of the season, the last Saturday. And so he was going to hunt with me in the morning. Then he was going back to go to his friend's wedding. So I hunted the afternoon, saw nothing. Obviously, with the wedding, he didn't come out Sunday morning, the last day of the season. He would come out in the afternoon. The buck we attract, we flip each year, every time we hunt, who's going to get the first shot at the big buck. It was his turn all week long, then he didn't hunt on Sunday. At 7:10, the big deer came up over the top of the ridge, 65 yards uphill from me. And, of course, I harvested him, and I sent him took a picture of it, texted my son, woke him up at 7:20. and then the greatest, he said, "Well, Dad, are you going to be able to drag him to the truck?" I said, I'm old, but I'm not dead, son. I said, "I'll manage it." Well, after dragging him 200 of the 450 yards, I realized I am old. And I called my young 24-year-old son and said, "Nope, Dad needs help the rest of the way." So the lesson again changed. For Christmas, he happened to buy me a deer cart. So
there you go.
Yeah. So, those lessons, I think, you spend time with your friends. I've been lucky enough through Pheasants Forever and Ducks Unlimited and our own organization, the Sportsman's Foundation, to mentor some kids from single-parent families over the last 8-9 years. They become more than just hunting mentors. They become a part of your life, your family. One of them is graduating from college. One of the first ones I ever started mentoring is graduating from college this May. See, those things, those lessons in the outdoors, to me, I know it sounds Pollyanna, for lack of a better term, Bruce, but those things transcend to other things in life. And I see kids that grew up with my kids that didn't get involved in the outdoors in any capacity. And they're lost to me. They don't have that connection to the ground. And I think that's a shame, personally.
And I think a lot of our listeners including yours truly, would agree to that. And there's so many good organizations that are doing a lot of good work. There's Pass It On, Mike Christensen. I believe he's from Nebraska. Yes. I just think it's so many people that have been on the show. So we're getting some traction, some momentum, but it's an uphill battle. One for recruitment into our sport, but it's I had a good friend, Ace Luciano. He just said 4x, and 4 times a year you take a kid out into the outdoors, whatever it is. You just give them an experience where all of a sudden no iPads and no iPods or no electronics, and you just spend a day in the outdoors, and you'd be amazed what you see and what you hear. And it's just, for me, I can't see my life not being in the outdoors.
Oh, I couldn't imagine it. And I think that type of passion, when you take somebody out, and whether it's a youth that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, they may not understand it that moment, but trust me, that impression that you will leave on that youngster, from that passion, from that understanding, that love of the outdoors, and it's not about the harvest, it's about the whole experience. The harvest to me is always the bonus, whatever species it is. And what we've started doing here locally in Nebraska with some of the Pheasants Forever chapters, some of the DU chapters, and I know Chris is part of the Big Game Conservation Association, which I'm a founding member of and helped them set up, and still an executive board member, is, those kids when they're, 10 to 15, 10 to 16, we all know that at 16, sometimes their lives don't allow for a constant interruption, if you will, or participation. And then obviously when they turn 18, just like my kids did, just like all my friends' kids did, they either go to college or they join the military or they're working full time. They have a tendency to kind of walk away from maybe that outdoor passion at 18 to 21, 22. And so what we try to start focusing on here is that 22-year-old, either bringing them back to the outdoors. They may have had an upbringing within it. They may have had some touches with it, if you will, growing up. In addition, we've started going after some of those 24 to 25-year-olds that are now either done with school, starting their careers, or they're done with their trade school, and we try to introduce them to it. And we have found, Bruce, that 24 to 30-year-old may not have a touch in a relationship with actually being an outdoorsman, but they do have a better understanding, I think, of what happens with the natural resources in a particular area or state. And the lack of those going forward causes a whole host of problems. So we found an avenue with some of these, that so-called millennial set, if you will, and the younger set of the millennial set, that they do have an interest from that standpoint. And then you start to combine it with, whether it's a day at the shooting range, whether it's a day actually hunting, whether it's a day, fishing, we start to draw some of those folks back in. And I think that's only a positive thing for all of us. I get the opportunity with my role to speak all over the state to a lot of different groups. And I always make the same comment. I always look around the room and I said, there's 65% of us in here with gray hair, either the beginning stages or the full set onset. Now that's fantastic in a lot of ways, but it's also scary that we don't have that young kid that's 24 up to that young man or woman that has a family, maybe 1 or 2 children, just starting children, involved. And like you said, Bruce, you don't have to spend a tremendous amount of time being involved. One meeting a month, maybe one every 2 months that the particular group's involved with, but they do projects throughout the year. And you may literally only have to spend 5 days a year being involved, but those 5 days are tremendously important for everybody that's involved in the biggest issue all groups face.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah,
I got to stop you because we're rolling right past our hard stop. It's I looked up and went, oh my goodness.
Sorry.
And listeners, that's what happens when you get somebody that's passionate about what they're doing, passionate about the outdoors, and passionate about getting people involved, just like every single one of these listeners. So on behalf of Whitetail Rendezvous, thank you, Scott Smathers, for being on the show today, and we really appreciate the things you shared. And hey, I can't wait to get you back on the show again. We need to get you scheduled maybe every quarter, because this is the central piece of the future of hunting is recruiting people and having people become knowledgeable about what each state is doing in regards to our natural resources.
Very much, Bruce. I appreciate it. Anytime, I'd love the opportunity. As you can tell, I love to talk about it. So, anytime. And I hope the listeners take away one thing is get somebody involved. Children, young adults, men or women, get them involved.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.